it's vital that we get governments all over the world out of the business of controlling monetary affairs. They always corrupt the monetary system in favor of themselves and their cronies and against the interests of the people.
From Nomad Capitalist Live in Mexico City, I'm Andrew Henderson. We're joined by the author of numerous New York Times bestsellers, including The Dollar Meltdown, Charles Goyette. Good to be with you.
Andrew, great to see you.
And I should say, 20 years ago, colleagues, boss, producer, radio host.
A long time
ago. It's a long time ago, 2003. Yeah. I'm getting myself up in the broadcasting business, running your morning show.
One thing about Andrew that you may not know, and I'm not trying to give away any secrets of what he was like 20 years ago, but when we talk about things economic and stuff, he would pipe up with these aphorisms. They were great, and the most obvious one everybody has probably heard him say in one form or another over the years is, well, capital flows where it's treated best, which of course it does. But you don't expect, one of the producers at the radio station to be talking about that. Every time you talk about an economic subject, another one of those aphorisms, and they were all gems. But I didn't know he was going to turn it into this wonderful enterprise that serves so many people with information they desperately need in this day and age, all based around those early aphorisms from the radio station.
There might be some hidden, some forgotten gems you should send my way we can use. My favorite story though was, and just because she's become something of a national figure. This is 20 years ago almost, Kyrsten Sinema, who was in Arizona, she was
state legislator there.
State representative or something,
yeah.
Came in at 7 a.m, and the giddiest guest you've ever seen, she's bouncing off the walls, and she's shouting, "Who doesn't love communism?" And look at her now that she's voting down, let's not tax the hedge funds.
I think that my guess would be that she's all about Kyrsten Sinema and getting reelected. She's in kind of a quasi-red state, and but she was all pretty apparently a Marxist back then. And I remember having kind of a contentious discussion with her. And I remember her kind of storming out off the show. But over the years, she's moved herself to the United States Senate. She holds the balance of the Senate in her hand. I mean, Biden doesn't get anything if he doesn't bring Kyrsten Sinema along, and Joe Manchin too, for that matter. But the divide in the United States Senate is so thin that she has made herself a very powerful figure by being able to run away from the pack from time to time and to make her demands. So,
I have to be, and we just had our sartorial expert on stage here at the conference. Not sure what the dress. I mean, is that how you're supposed to dress for the United States Senate?
I teased your audience yesterday here at Nomad Capitalist by saying, if you get Andrew alone in a corner, ask him what Kyrsten Sinema wore on the air that morning at 7 o'clock, because I don't remember exactly what she said, but I certainly remember what she wore, and she still distinguishes herself in Washington as being very sartorially flamboyant, I would say.
We're like the Real Housewives of Scottsdale, remembering what somebody wore in 2000.
But she's shrewd, she's capable. She, I think, has adjusted her position less in favor of Karl Marx and more in favor of Kyrsten Sinema's reelection. And I mentioned too the other night that the last time I saw her, she was, I think, subtly imploring me to use what minor influence I have, which I have none, but to see if a libertarian candidate couldn't be motivated to run for the United States Senate in her next reelection campaign. This, of course, would have the effect of her running as a Democrat, a Republican that might be a capable challenger against her, and then a libertarian candidate as well on the ballot who's able to peel some votes off from the Republican and clear her way to victory. So
it seems a little transparent.
Well, it didn't fool anybody. We knew it was about Kyrsten Sinema. But
what do you make of the fact, this is interesting, watching how Arizona doubled income tax on high earners, and the definition of a high earner isn't that high, quite frankly. I mean, Arizona, for me, the idea of I'm going to move from California and there's some other state out there, Doesn't the fact that Arizona has become very purple, really almost blue? I mean, who's running the show? You're going to have a Democratic governor, Democratic senators. I mean, it's largely blue. What does that portend for folks who think there'll be somewhere to go in the U.S.?
And even the Republicans, aren't, at least conservatives of the old stock there. There is no real, that I'm aware of, there's no real anti-tax coalition. A candidate will run on that basis now. Candidate for governor right now there, Carrie Lake, is distinguishing herself as being serious and well-informed, and she scares the media there because she just shreds them. And so maybe there's some hope for Arizona, but we have a lot of Californians moving in, and they're bringing a lot of California politics with them and stuff. So all the things that they're running away from, are being introduced into the states to which they are running, which is, high taxes, big government, a lot of intrusion in your life and stuff, and hope it doesn't go much further that way.
Why is that the case, though? Because we help people go to other countries. We were talking about the country of Georgia. You have to have a referendum, a constitutional change to raise taxes. I don't go to Georgia and suggest, hey, let's raise taxes. Why do people go from California, which they're leaving, go to Arizona, Florida, Nevada, and want to change things for the worst? Why does that happen?
Well, it's hard to know, but there are people that encourage them to come, whatever their politics or views are. The home builders have had a century of cashing in the checks, because Arizona has been such a mega growth state over the years. So they want people to come no matter what politics, and they'll figure it out in the by and by when we all die. And no matter what they do with tax rates, it's fine. We built a hell of a lot of homes, so there's great constituency for that. I actually wrote a paper, I haven't given it, for one of the candidates about what you could really do for the state of Arizona that's not done anywhere is instead of, the old kind of statist thing that they do all over the country now is they encourage businesses to move to the state with the lure of giving them mega tax breaks. So big, huge businesses that don't need it get these tax breaks, and the burden falls on the people that are already there and businesses that are already there. I saw one of the big sports superstores moved into Arizona. They had locations all over the place. They didn't have to pay any taxes. They had a taxpayer abatement scheme and stuff. And all the little guys have been selling sports equipment successfully in the town, for years, and paying their taxes are driven out of business by it. So my suggestion was to the people there, why don't you run on a campaign that you will treat our people well now? Doesn't that sound like familiar? Hey, capital goes where it's treated well, right? Treat the people who are already, you don't have to give special abatements and favors and compete with other states to lure effective businesses. They'll see how well you treat your existing client, your existing tax base, and then they'll follow it. But this is, we're far, far too gone to think about things like that.
I surmise that the culture of a place like the United States has changed and is going in the wrong direction against someone like yourself or myself, who's very much a free marketeer. And so how do you explain to these folks who say capitalism doesn't work, the folks who are now turning to the Bernie Sanders wing, when they say, hey, listen, all these little people got put out of business?
Yeah, it's very painful for me to see this, and it's kind of the fault, I would say it's primarily the fault of like Republicans and conservatives, because the American people, the young people especially, think that capitalism is the monopoly man, the guy with a little mustache and he's got spats and a top hat and a monocle. That's what they think it is. They think it's cronyism. They think that the definition of capitalism is cronyism. These guys go to the government and they get their market share protected and so on and so forth. And no wonder. And so you saw, during the bank bailouts after the mortgage meltdown, you saw, people in the streets, signs saying to the elite class and to the 1%, go ahead and jump. Right? It was like, we know that you've been ripping us off all this time. The wealth divide in America has been exacerbated by the policies that the Republicans and Democrats have instituted all these years. And so they have no idea that we haven't been living in a capitalist society for a long time. And so they see how rotten it is, how favorable it is to the influential and the cronies, and they think, well, the answer must be anti-capitalism. It must be Bernie Sanders. And I've even, horror of horrors, I saw people that were in the Ron Paul revolution that, 4 years, 8 years after his first run, later, going to work for Bernie Sanders. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. To me, though, I'm embarrassing myself. I was right there. I can't do this in front of Charles Goyette. Oh, yeah, okay, let me go. Yeah, what would Ron Paul say about what is happening? Because there has been a terrible job marketing that this is not what's on the tin.
I gave really, I think, one of the most important talks of my life about 6 months ago to a private group of economists, an economic group, and saying that basically it's about time that you face the reality that you are losing. And here's what you do. You come together, you raise a lot of money, you get a candidate, everybody goes to work. If it's a local thing or a national thing, you put money together, you advance people, you work hard, you go to forums, you write letters to the editor, you put yard signs out, all this campaign stuff, you go to rallies, you go to events and stuff. And then what happens? If you lose, that's all that capital is gone. It's sunk cost, the money's gone. You spent it all on this big project and you didn't win. It's gone. Those resources are gone, they're all spent. Now, if you win, you suddenly discover that when they get to Washington, your guys aren't your guys anymore.
They're off.
They're gone. They're not your. You thought they were. Oh, you thought we wanted this guy because he was our guy, and we saw him around the neighborhood, and our kids played little league, and he was our guy and stuff. And they get back there and they get seduced by the swamp, and so all of this human effort and stuff that goes into into resisting the growth of the deep state, resisting the growth of the socialist state, all of this stuff has gone for naught, really. And my suggestion is that it's because people don't really understand what they're fighting, and a new tactic is needed.
What do you make then of the Trump movement and this idea of not so much being about capitalism, but more about populism?
Yeah, well, populism's fine. Anything anybody does that loosens the death grip of the state on people's liberties is fine with me, Andrew. But I will tell you, and I don't even like to get into Trump because people are so sharply divided, and he has voiced some things that to me are very important, and what people think that he represents in many cases is something that is important. But on the other hand, he has dropped the ball. He made appointments to people that were totally committed to undermining his best policies. I mean, think about that. You finally get to the pinnacle of power and you're going to advance your agenda. In my case, you know a little about my history. In my case, it was, stopping this regime change crazed global American military empire. That's what I was all about. And so he came in there, but who did he appoint all around him? Mike Pompeo and Haley Barber, or Haley, whatever her name is, and it was all of these guys. It was who's the guy with the walrus mustache?
The architect of all the wars, right?
John Bolton.
John Bolton.
So it was all these guys, and so he came down when he ran for office. He came down the staircase at Trump Towers, and he said, "And by the way, the whole Iraq War thing was a lie. They lied to you." And I thought, well, that's good. You're off to a good start. And when I was on the radio and telling people that this was all lies, I got death threats, and people were very unhappy about it. And now everywhere I go, well, Trump knows it was a lie. It was a lie, and there were no weapons of mass destruction. Everybody accepts it as being true now, but it's too late to matter.
Well, the good news is all those companies that you were working with are now bankrupt, and,
Yeah.
and they've all moved on, and you're still here.
Yeah.
The other thing, when Trump came down that escalator, obviously a lot of talk about where we are here in Mexico. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. You've not been to Mexico City. You're here for our conference. What is it you think about this city, seeing that I think it's probably so maligned in the U.S.?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. First of all, if you ever get a chance, and if Andrew can be persuaded to hold a Nomad Capitalist event in Mexico City again, make sure it's in Polanco, in this neighborhood. This is charming, beautiful, seductive beyond belief. This is a wonderful place to be. I brought my wife with me, and we are loving being here. It's gorgeous. It's just breathtaking. Then on the other hand, my driver from the airport was telling me, in his view, calling the metropolitan area that he lives, He says, well, his metropolitan area, so it's beyond the city limits, is like, I think he said 26 million people. This to me is an enormous puzzle about how you feed and, well, just stop right there. Feed, forget energy and stuff, but how do you feed 26 million people? And the delivery systems, the supply chains and stuff are very delicate. And if they're left alone, they function wonderfully. But you get some madman in there killing the supply chains and, issuing centralized orders on, who's going to make what and who's going to do what and stuff. It's very, very prone to failure. And you just wonder what life would be like in a city of 26 million people if somebody comes in and screws up the free market.
And yet you see, during this pandemic of the last couple of years, the president, who pretty far to the left, kept things open because of the kind of what I would call forced entrepreneurship. A lot of people working just on their own, on the streets, selling stuff, that kind of thing. A lot of Californians moving here. It makes news. Tucker Carlson talks about it. You'd rather be here than California, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and now how about a turn of events? I see story after story of people in Mexico scratching their head going, well, I'm not sure we want all these people.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Serves you right, I guess.
Yeah. You wrote the book. The first book was The Dollar Meltdown. That was 12 or 13 years ago now at this point. And the premise of that was what has changed? Well, certainly it's gotten worse.
Yeah, it really wasn't about the dollar meltdown, but the publishers thought that was a sexy title, and I can't complain. It was a New York Times bestseller. It was an international bestseller, sold great in places you wouldn't even think. But it was kind of a primer on the way money and markets work. And that's basically what it was. And, and then they kept imploring me, well, add a chapter about this, add a chapter. And I go, okay, I'll add a chapter about this, about it. But basically the central theme of the book was, that money is critical to human functioning. I had a philosophy professor when I was in college who talked about civilizations, the great golden civilizations that we all learn about, and you wonder, oh, those people, they did so great, they advanced civilization so much, and mankind's affairs are so much better. And they all wondered, but we don't know what set that off. We don't know what started the pot boiling in these other countries. And, well, I do. And what started, it's not because I'm a genius, but you just see the core. What started the pot boiling in all of those countries was solid money. A dependable, reliable, precious metals-based monetary system because people trusted the money, commerce grew, merchants from around the world came in, bringing goods and disseminating ideas, and all of a sudden there was a hunger for new ideas, and they just like flowers. These cultures flourish, and you could talk about I don't know, the Byzantine Empire, 800 years of a stable currency, or the Florentine Renaissance, the Golden Age of Greece. You could talk about when England ruled the world and they had a solid, dependable precious metals currency, and the United States the same. And so money is central to human function. Look, money is half of every transaction. Think about that. There's one part of every transaction that's money. And nobody thinks that, well, the money needs to be protected. And the American people believe, like my kids believed, that, money's sort of like eggs and milk, that you get them at the grocery store. They don't think about the farm in the background, right?
That's what everyone, right, my father's always said, if you ask people, where does meat come from? Oh, the store.
So they don't think about these bills, and they have, and Andrew, I keep on my desk, I have a big stack of Venezuelan bolivars, bolivar notes. A friend of mine brought me from Venezuela, and I give them to people, and it's really interesting because it's, it's beautiful.
Beautiful notes.
Beautiful. And you hold them up to the light, and they're watermarked, and they have metallic security thread, and it has all the things that impress officials, even government officials in the United States and the rest of the West. They're so impressed because it has signatures of officials on it, and it has logos and seals, and it has images of past political figures, and it's on this fancy linen stock, and it's just like, these are people that are impressed by public figures that wear shiny ties, right? Yeah. I'm dazzled by your shiny. So yes, so I give these to people so they kind of get the idea, and everybody guesses I make people guess what these are worth, and they have no idea.
Oh, yeah.
They have no idea.
You come down to Bogota, they make purses out of them. They make wallets. Yeah, it's $5. Get it out of here.
Yeah, you find them by the roadside. Here's a good story for you. You want this one? So in the south of Venezuela, they have a little gold mining down there, and with the currency, the government's currency having turned into virtual worthlessness, the gold miners find that if they have like a little flake on their clothes or something at the end of the day, it's not like in the big industrial gold mines, where they vacuum everything, you don't get. But if they have a little flake of gold, they get to it's not a big problem and stuff. And they have developed an economy that depends on these little flakes of gold. So they get a hotel room, they get a haircut, they go to the doctor, whatever, the little flakes of gold, and the little flakes are being monetized in some way. And they all weigh differently, and nobody's standardized it yet. And I suppose, as the currency evolves, it will be standardized. But here's the irony of the thing. They use the paper money to wrap up and preserve the little gold flakes.
That seems like your next book, Flakes of Gold.
Yeah, that would
the underground economies of the world. So we had a panel, gold versus Bitcoin. You are decidedly on the side of precious metals, is that correct? What do you say to folks who are like, gold is over, Bitcoin is the new standard, countries like El Salvador, good job adopting that?
Yeah. So I took the gold side, and it only makes sense because I've written about that quite a bit, but I really don't have a side. I think we share a common opponent. Bitcoin shares a common opponent with people that understand the importance of gold as money. And that opponent is things like governments with their legal tender laws. And as I've always said, back when you were saying in the old days, money flows where it's treated well. Capitalism looks for welcoming arms. I used to always say, you don't have to pass a law to persuade people to hold on to and to keep and to want
what's best.
A good, reliable currency of enduring value. So you have to ask yourself, why do they have to pass onerous laws to force people to use their money? Who needs to do that?
You're saying El Salvador, for example.
Yeah, or I'm saying legal tender laws in the United States.
Right.
For example, courts might not enforce gold contracts or Bitcoin contracts or whatever it may be because it competes with the government's money. So the side I'm on in that debate is, I certainly think that gold has thousands of years of enduring history as a superior money, and it will continue to do so for a long time. But my side is that it's vital that we get governments all over the world out of the business of controlling monetary affairs. They always corrupt the monetary system in favor of themselves and their cronies, and against the interests of the people.
What's interesting to me from what we discussed earlier, that the average person, I don't think, knows the difference between what's 10 million, 100 million, and 100 billion. That's a lot of money, and fine, fair enough. But there's a difference. If you are in the United States and we have people that we help, they have $50 million, they have $100 million. I don't know that they're pulling the levers of power. Maybe they would be in some other country, but this idea that just some regular rich guy who built a business is don't you think that's very unknown to most people?
It's very unknown. And of course they don't understand, we hear this a lot in the get the rich debates in Congress and stuff. These people's capital is tied up in things. It's tied up in things that make, that provide jobs and make goods and services that people want and that people need to make life work. So when you say, take, Steve Jobs or something like that, and he's worth so much money. Well, yeah, but he has an interest in a company that you don't want to break up and give it to the government. He has an interest in a company that has made our lives better in many, many ways. He has an interest in a company. So to say that, this is capital and these are evil capitalists and stuff, well, it's true. It's a big pile of capital, but it's not just sitting there. It's not just sitting there humming, waiting for somebody to come along and grab it.
They don't understand anyone who's different than that. Their money is sitting in a savings account, so that must be what Steve Jobs has, $11 billion.
Yeah, of course. It must be, well, let's grab us some.
And then I see, whatever you think of him these days, Bill Gates did some speech, this is a number of years ago. They tried to break up his company. They ultimately settled. He said, listen, I'm all for paying taxes. I think guys like him maybe are too much for paying taxes. He said, I've paid over $10 billion in taxes. And if the argument is we got to pay for the roads, which I know you're a big fan of the roads, hasn't he paid enough? Especially when they just come after the guy.
Yeah. So the voracious, predatory politicians, there ought to be Andrew Henderson aphorism in this. Predatory, greedy politicians always go where the capital's unprotected.
We'll write that down.
Yeah. But I mean, it's true. I mean, they always look for, who's, you know, it's really kind of a low, kind of a moral thing, in my view, because the politicians fan a kind of quasi-populist fever in people to get the rich. And the idea is, we're going to get the rich, and then we'll spread the wealth, and then we'll all be equal. And so every step that they take, so they create levels of taxation that eventually, after a couple of years of inflation, the middle class gets bumped up into the higher tax rates that were intended to get the rich. But whenever you go out there, driven by jealousy and so on, yeah, let's get these guys, we're going to get the rich, we're going to take what they have and stuff like that. And then, so the consequence is that they take the money from the rich, and then when you need a road built, you need a building built, you need somebody to build an airport, you need somebody to start airplanes, or somebody to invent cell phones or something. There's no capital available. It's gone. It's all been divvied up, and it's been spent at the horse races.
And to say that the United States is some totally uncorrupt country where no money is wasted, I mean, it's You wrote a second book, Red, White, and Broke All Over. To me, what's broken, and I'm watching from afar in the United States, is you mentioned jobs. Yeah. I don't even, is the goal even to create jobs among many folks anymore? Now the goal is, why should I have to have a job? Why don't we give me a universal basic income? Why don't we send someone a check? Is this not kind of the slouch towards...
Yeah, it's like things fall apart, the center cannot hold. A couple of years ago, I had my first encounter with a theory, and I actually reviewed a book for a guy, and I wrote a blurb for him about it, one of the first books that took on modern monetary theory. But the first time I heard this, I laughed, and I said to myself, nobody's going to buy this stuff. Nobody's going to believe this. Today, it's a fact of life in Washington. The government, I suppose the Federal Reserve, just off the top of my head, not even back of envelope, I'm just making this number up, but I think it's probably going to be close. The Federal Reserve probably owns about 40% of the national debt. So understand what this means. The government spends money. They hire people, they spend money, they build things, they give it away to cronies, they do whatever it is the governments do. They spend all this money, but they don't have enough money, so they have to go out and borrow. So they tax here, but they spend here. They have to borrow the difference. So they go out into the treasury market and they sell bonds. They say, lend us your money, you lend us, $1 billion, and then we'll pay you back in 10 years. They borrow the money. So the Federal Reserve, over the last, let's just go back to 2008, has been buying treasury bonds. Now think about this. They use money that didn't exist in the morning to buy government debt, to fund the debt of the United States government in the afternoon. The money was made up with a keystroke entry. It was made up, it didn't exist. So they're buying, treasury bonds and stuff and funding the debt. Meanwhile, the other debtors around the world, look, China used to own, it was a major creditor of the United States, funded, at one point owned $1.3 trillion of U.S. government debt instruments. That's a pretty good chunk of change for a government that needs to borrow a lot of money. Now they're down below $1 trillion. People all over the world, central banks all over the world, are dishoarding their U.S. government debt and replacing it with gold. Because here's the great irony. They know what the game is. The central bankers of the world know exactly what we're doing. They're not fooled by this money printing business at all. And a lot of them don't mind doing it to their own people. They don't mind fleecing their own people, but they don't want to be fleeced by us, right? It makes some kind of sense. And so, they're moving their central bank reserves out of dollars. They're moving to gold. They're creating bilateral, multilateral trading, bank settlement institutions and stuff to bypass the dollar. So we're in a time in which the United States imperial position, and I don't mean just military imperiality, but I mean economic hegemony is cracking and fading. I don't have to tell you, but it's happening really fast.
What do you make, very controversial topic right now, of what Putin is talking about, hard currency, other things outside of the Western financial system?
Yeah, I mean, they have no choice. It's astonishing to me. It's like a restaurateur that forbids his best customers from coming in and doing business with him. It's astonishing to me that we are dependent we're dependent on the kindness of foreign strangers to fund our debt, and yet we're marching around the world with these imperial dictates, telling people what they may and may not do. I mean, look, we're coming into this winter. Doug McGregor puts it this way. He says, I'll put it this way. It'll be interesting to see if the rest of the world continues to capitulate to America and the neocons running the show. Will they refuse to buy heating oil or natural gas from the closest, best sources at the best possible prices so they can please Uncle Sam? Will they actually do that? If they think they can get away with that, everybody north of Rome is going to be very cold this winter. But we're forcing all of our allies away from. They must do our will, even if it's against their best interest. And it's had terrible repercussions around the world and throwing the whole world. Look, this week, Andrew, the talk of nuclear standoffs and stuff is growing every day. None of this had to happen. None. In fact, any time over the last couple of years, we could have cut a deal with Russia and Putin. We could have gone to the negotiating table. Inside the administration, they've done everything they could to block any kind of negotiations about Ukraine, to try to stand this mess down. So they fund the Ukrainians. Ukrainians are out there dying. The whole world is on tenterhooks. And now, we have all this talk about advanced weaponry and nukes, and we really will use them and stuff. It's very, very grim, and you have to conclude that there are crazy people in charge. It's crazy.
It's getting worse, no?
It's getting worse.
Yeah. Lastly, the forthcoming book, The Last Gold Rush.
Oh, yeah.
What is that?
It's already out. Okay. And it's called The Last Gold Rush Ever. And it may not be the best title ever. It sounds nice. The publisher thought it was okay, but it's called The Last Gold Rush Ever. So I'm afraid that if I go to the local bookstore, it'll be put in the section with people exploring the Klondike or whatever, because they think it's about, a panning for gold in Northern California. But it's really not about that. But it is about the last time that people will rush. They will stand in line around, like they do when there's a bank run, to exchange their dollars for gold. It's the last bull market dollar bull market in gold, at least in the dollar's present form. Is the last one. And all of these kind of bull markets are always driven by it's the same thing in every country around the world. It's always, a lot of spending, a lot of debt. It's bad monetary policy, made up money that has no real intrinsic value. So, but this time in the United States, this is like a strange confluence of everything happening at once. This is like the crossroads of history. Everything's happening at once. Of course it's the debt, and of course it's the money print, but we have all these other things coming together. It's like when there's a fire and the house burns down. The fire investigators come and they look, oh yeah, it burned the wood first, and then it burned the shingles, and it did this and that. But if they think it's arson, they go in and they start looking for signs of accelerants. Well, we have all these accelerants now in the failing dollar. We have all these accelerants. We have currency wars going on all over. We have the war on cash going on. It's ramping up badly just in the last couple of weeks. The central bank digital currency has gotten a new boost from the White House, which is crowing about how this is Biden's vision for us. We have the end of kind of American political hegemony, like, telling the Germans that they must not have natural gas to heat their homes in the winter. All this kind of stuff all over the world. War threats all over. The really big one is the end of the global American military empire. I mean, can you imagine? We've got a proxy war going on in Ukraine, and if Biden is to be believed last week, we're ready to come to blows in Taiwan. So we have a classic two-front extension and stuff. So it's about it anyway. It's about this confluence of events all at the same time that we're least prepared for it because our debt is already so high. Our monetary system has been so eroded, and now all of these other things are happening at once. The spread of socialism in the United States, certainly in the Western world, at rates that you would have taken impossible at a time. So it's the last gold rush ever. The last time that people will be going through, maybe the dollar will survive in some future sort of weird form and stuff. But basically, this is the big one.
And what we're talking about here, it was interesting as I landed a couple months ago back in Malaysia, as Germans, the headline was Germans don't have air conditioning. Their landlords are turning it off. I'm going home in a country that people in Germany might say, why would I want to move there? To tax-friendly, warm Malaysia. I go back, I'm turning on the smart home to the crispest, coolest air conditioning you can possibly imagine. It's for all you can eat. Cheap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how the world has changed in our
How
lifetime.
long will they put up? You tell me. I mean, are they going to put up with this much longer?
I think we're seeing more and more people who are here,
Yeah.
who are going where they're treated best, because just in the last couple of years, you're seeing the government is not on your side. I think more people are realizing.
You can't even believe it. And I was going to say about Nomad Capitalist, I spoke at the first one, and now I look at this one, and these people are, the numbers are amazing, but the hunger and in fact, just about the knowledge of people today. I've been around for a long time, as you can tell by my white hair, and I was originally went to work for one of the biggest gold and currency dealers back in the 70s during the Carter years. And I got a real education there. But here's the difference. In those days, people would want to find out about it or come talk to you about currencies and about gold and things like that. But they didn't really understand what was going on. They understood a little bit of the fiscal thing. The government spends more money than it has. And, the fiscal thing concerned them, and we got to, maybe we should get some congressmen to be deficit hawks or whatever. Now I've kind of re-immersed myself back in this milieu of people, and it's totally different. People come in. I feel superfluous if I have to talk to people about, quantitative easing or like I don't know, monetizing the debt or something. They don't need to hear it from me. People get it everywhere. It's a much more sophisticated audience now because they've been confronted with the reality of what these clowns have done for a long time. So they need the kind of answers and directions and experience that you guys have to share with them.
Charles Goyette, good to see you.
Great to see you, Andrew, always.
Great pleasure.